All right, we are back for another edition of Sunday Night Astro Live. I am here with Peachy, the astrological weather cat. She's sitting in with us tonight. The Astro Cat himself is seems like he's taking the night off. He's over in the crown. He has his own little crown on the floor here that he spends some time with. So yeah. We had that. There we go. Okay, yeah. How are we doing, everybody? How's life treating you in the multiverse? We're gonna hang out for a little bit, let some people show up. Get some pets in with the Astro Weather Cat. She needs the pets. Let me tell you. Tough weekend for her. It's when her cousins come in from out of town. Her crazy cousins from Austin come in. She doesn't have a lot of patience for the crazy cousins from Austin. Let me tell you. They are. Yes, I do, my dear. Yes, I do. I suppose that's sort of a show. Okay, there we go. So, yeah, we are in some very interesting times, aren't we? Went to a memorial yesterday, which was, it was really quite something. It's like you don't want to go. You don't want to go to a lot of them. If you start going to a lot of them, you know that your number is going to come up. Like if you start going to a lot of memorials, it's like, why are all these people that I know passing away? Maybe it has something to do with their age. Maybe. So, really dear friend of the show, Rodney Edwards, he passed away just after his birthday in January. Another birthday effect person. And we went to his memorial yesterday down in San Antonio. And Rod was he was a part of our lives. When we did our first event here in the Hill Country, his wife Dorothy, who of course we're still very good friends with, think the world of her. She was the one that was really interested in what I was talking about, right? Dorothy has just a very super curious and always questioning the truth, like what's real, what's not real. And she was fearless in her pursuit of the truth. She's German by birth, and Rod was stationed over in Germany. He was a military dude, and he met her in Germany, and that's where their courtship and relationship began. And they eventually got married and settled in San Antonio and had 2 children together. And Dorothy dragged Rod along to the event. Oh, here he is. Here's the Astro Cat. Look at that. You decided to get on in on this, huh? Shall I herald your arrival? Here he is. There he is, the man. Look at him. That's right. So, Dorothy wrangled Rod and said, "Rod, you got to come to this event." And Rod was really interested. I didn't know what to make of Rod at first. but we sat down. We had this big room. We had all these tables, and we had all this food. And I remember the first event, I lost a lot of money. I over ordered on food. It was really, it was. I learned a lot, but we sat down with Rod and Dorothy because I didn't know who they were, and it was just the thing that was amazing about that event is that this is what I found with every one of the events is that people just couldn't wait to start talking to other people. They were like having real conversations. They weren't on their cell phones. They weren't on in a chat room. And I'm not saying that this is bad that you're in a chat room, by the way, but it was a chance and a lot of the people knew who they were from the chat, right? They had their names and stuff. And so when they said their names, like, oh yeah, I know who you are, right? And it was a really, really cool thing. It was the first one had just so much energy. I think we had about 90 people. It was really, and I spent way too much money, but we had a great time. I flew a friend of mine out from California. We had a concert. I rented a space for the concert. I had buses. We drove the buses to the concert. I mean, it was, it was cool. We went to Enchanted Rock. I mean, I pulled out all the stops. Although I've had a few stops for the second year. I had a few bullets left in my chamber for the second year, so that went really well. But we sat down with Rod and Dorothy, and Dorothy started to just go right into the Tartarian stuff, right? It was like, and at that time I was just getting my feet wet with Tartaria. And I'm like, oh wow, this is really interesting. You're bringing a ton of really interesting information to my world, right? I know a little bit about this, but clearly you spent some time going there. And her husband, Rod, was an architect. So he brought an architect's and kind of eye to it all, right? So he brought that up. He brought the architectural angle up. And then Rod started to talk about his personal life. And he started to talk about when he was young and was basically raised in a very religious household. And I think his brother, who was at the memorial yesterday, wound up becoming a pastor. But Rod was in a kind of a military religious family, right? And the religious part was really big in Rod's family. And he started to talk about how there were times where he had these like Holy Spirit moments, where he was experiencing like the power of healing for people. Like there were things that were going on with him that he could not explain, right? He couldn't explain it. He couldn't quantify what was happening to him through that world. And he was trying to find answers to some of these things, and they weren't sufficient enough for Rod. And so even though he was having, what I would call these kind of Holy Spirit kinds of moments, right? The explanations for them didn't fit. So eventually, Rod sort of falls away from the church and the faith and the dogma, but he can't reconcile these almost supernatural experience that he has, right? And I'm listening to him and I'm going, wow, man, this guy's really complex because, he's actually, a lot of people talk about things, right? And I can't really tell you the exact stories that he told me. I just remember him telling me, I'm going, really? That fucking happened? You did that? That happened with those people? And when you saw Rod, it was like, he was not somebody who would bullshit you. This guy wore a baseball cap most of the time. Garrulous is the word I would use for Rod. Garrulous. He was large man, kind of large presence, kind of larger than life. He'd let you know he was there, right? He was very interesting. He was very, very interesting. But the thing about Rod too is that he was also an incredible listener. Like he really listened to people, and he listened to them for a number of reasons. He wanted to find out where they were coming from, and he wanted to see if they were bullshit artists, right? That was always, where Rod was rooted. He was rooted in, this I wouldn't call it 3D world, but it was sort of like a show it to me sort of universe, right? Let's see if this person and what they're saying holds up. And so he was tough that way, right? And there were even times where in the future, I think he came to about 3 of my events. And there were even times in the future where he said, I told Dorothy, I'm not going this year. I'm not going this year. And then every year he would go and he would have his mind blown, right? So he would come back the next year eventually. He said, okay, I'm tired of having my mind blown. But when he sat down that night, I thought to myself, this dude is really interesting, right? Because he was really wrestling with this idea of faith, and not just faith, but almost like supernatural phenomena that went along with his faith. So Rob became an architect, and I think a very successful architect in San Antonio. And some of his architect friends and coworkers were there at this memorial yesterday. And one of the things that we did one year is I did like a remote viewing exercise with people. And I had these images that I had put together, right? And in remote viewing, what you do is you get these coordinates, like latitude, longitude, and that's all you get. You just give people who are doing the remote viewing, you just give them the coordinates. That's it, right? And they're supposed to go into a state, and they have techniques. I think they call it cool down, right? Cool down techniques, and then they would then draw what they saw, right? So I didn't do the coordinates part, or maybe I did one with the coordinates. I take that back, but mostly what I had was images, and the images were on a board, and they were on the back side of the board. So when the board was up, right, you couldn't see the image. So you had to kind of go into the image, right? Like you had to go there. And we did this cool down exercise. And then I had these series of images, right? And there were 2 people that were consistently over the chart or over the top with the images. And one of them was Rod. And not only was he like getting hits on these images, but Rod was a really good artist, right? In addition to being an architect, he drew this stuff out. Like, and it's like, oh man, you're not only like, over the target, but man, you're really putting some detail into this. So he was really interesting in that way. Because it seemed like he, could tap in from both sides of his brain. Like he had like a Western Union telegram, telegraph service going from, one lobe to the other, and was able to connect them up really, really well. Yeah, he was just a great guy and really interesting. And I think I know Dorothy will miss him terribly, and I think we'll all, anybody that knew him will miss him. He was just one of those big personalities, It's like there's a hole left in the world because this guy's gone. You know what I mean? It's like you just have these experiences with these people, and you just can't believe that they're gone. Like, what the fuck, And then his daughter had put together this series of images for him, and really beautiful. Like it was almost like the Rod Edwards Museum. I mean, it was really fucking cool. I got to tell you. And there were some images of him near the end, and he was lying down on the couch, and the family behind him. And I hadn't seen Rod since Thanksgiving, and I didn't even recognize him. It was just really wild, It was wild. It was like he looked like an 80-year-old man. The cancer just eaten away not just his body, but his life force and his years. And it was just, really, really shocking to see, and, well, just be grateful for what you have. Be grateful. I mean, look, I think things are already getting hot, but things are going to get hot in this world. And, one of the things that it was really interesting too, as I sort of talk here, wait for people to show up a little bit more. It was really interesting too, because um, the minister, right, he was kind of cool. He was cool. He was this black dude. He looked like he probably played some offensive tackle in the NFL at one point or somewhere along the way. And he was bald, and he was wearing this blue silk robe, this almost blue caftan. And I was like, man, that's kind of cool, right? And the thing about black people and Christianity, but they make it sound cool, they make it feel cool. Do you know what I'm talking about? It's like, can I get an amen? When you hear that, you're like, oh man, like, oh yeah, yeah, sure, amen, right? And the eloquence and the articulation, right, and the soul, right, it makes it all very cool. It makes Christianity kind of cool. Like, I'm thinking, if I was black, I could probably do that. I could go there. Right? I could be a part of it. But anytime, this is just me, I could be completely wrong, right? But anytime I see a white guy doing it, they just sound angry, right? They just sound angry when they come off and try to do the Southern preacher thing. It just sounds angry. It's like, oh, I don't want any of that, right? And if they try to come off sounding, like soulful preacher man, that sounds a little weird too, right? So where do you go? Do you go into sort of the Anglican, tidy whitey upright bucket? I mean, that doesn't really appeal to me either. So I was a little stuck, right? I was in the moment. I was a little stuck. But he said something that was really, really interesting. A couple of things that were interesting, and I had to think about them. And first of all, there's this call to action at the end of the ceremony, right? There's a call to action, and the call to action is for you, all the sinners out there, to redeem your soul, so that because you're going to die, and you want to be in a good place. You want to be in the place Rodney is right now. And I'm like, oh, this is interesting, right? He's got like a captive audience now who are all thinking about death, and some of whom are quite old, right? There are people there who are older than me. And and this guy's like, hey man, your time may be coming. You better get right with Christ, because you want to sit with the on the right hand side of God with Rod, right? And so it was interesting. That part was interesting. And I had to ask myself, am I a sinner? Am I really a sinner? And I've sinned just like everybody else. But I can tell you right now, man, I've paid for some of those sins in this lifetime. So, and I do my best to, live my life in a righteous way, right? To the best of my ability. We're all human. We all fail. It's just the way it is. We can't always live up to, our own standards, but we do the best that we can, right? So that was really interesting. I'm like, man, I don't really feel like a sinner. I'm not feeling where you're coming from, brother. But I understand where you're coming from. I totally get it. And then I thought about, okay, then he started to talk about heaven, right? This is all from Paul. Like, Paul's talking about heaven. And it's like, the streets are gold, and the buildings are gold, and the streets are so gold, but they're also transparent gold. And I'm like, isn't that Trump Tower? Isn't that what Donald Trump tried to get to? This Trump Tower? Although Trump himself says that he's probably not going to go to heaven. That's a whole other discussion. But I thought about it. It's like, well, what happens if you do go to heaven? Right? Like, what happens if you wind up in heaven? Like, what is heaven really like? Right? Like, do you get instruction on how to be God? I mean, do you get to sit by God's side as God like destroys worlds or creates worlds, or God enters into the affairs of man? Do you like, are you there? Are you a participant? Are you kind of learning at the elbow of God, through all this multidimensional experience? It's like, is that what happens when you get to heaven? I mean, or is it's just supernal bliss for eternity, and you just like light, love, all consciousness, right? I've got questions. Right? I mean, if you're there for eternity, you got to be doing something. I mean, I'm a Virgo, I got to have something to do for eternity, make the universe a better place. Hey, God, I've been thinking about this. What do you think about wings on a cat? I think it's a great idea. What do you think? Wings on a cat. Is there a planet that we can like experiment with that on? I mean, we can start small. It doesn't have to be giant cats and giant wings, but wings on a cat could be really interesting, God. What do you think? I think it's complicated. You get your next mission. The promise is the new body, just like Jesus Christ. Yeah, okay. Then what? It's a nice saying. It's a nice saying. And then what? What do you do? Do you enter into the affairs of man? Do you heal? Are you a Christ-like being? Do you watch over, guard other worlds? Right? I think it's complicated. You get to chill with God playing a lyre. That's the Three Stooges version. Yes, the missions continue. How do they continue, though? That's what I'd like to know. I want lots of wool to spin. You'll have the best wool ever. Your wool will be golden. Your wool will be golden. You will have golden wool to spin. And it would be the finest gold that there ever was. It's what you do now, I feel. I like that. You decide what to do with it. So can I get flying cats? Can I be the creator of the planet of flying cats? That's what I want to do. God pick up a copper penny on a golden street in the silver city of heaven's balance. You're assuming time is reality. What if it's not real? Well, I think it is and it isn't. It is and it isn't. There are times when time is not real, and there are times when time is real. Right? Like if you have to pick up your kid at a school and you're late consistently, meaning you're not on time, the school does not look well upon that. And there's a chance that the school may actually send Child Protective Services to your home, in which case time is very real. Or if you have to show up at a job at a particular time, and it's an agreed upon time, then time is quite real. Now, there are other moments where time seems to not exist at all. People have mystical experiences that seem like they last for centuries, and they've only been sort of out of time for about 5 minutes. So I think time is a very relative subject. That's what I think. It's a very... Oh, I mean, time in heaven, not here. Well, can't heaven be here? Right? Are we not allowed to experience heaven on earth? Is that a complete impossibility? I'm just playing devil's advocate tonight. That's what I'm here to do. I'm here to play a little devil's advocate. My friend just passed away, and I hope he's fine. And I hope he's in a really good place. And I hope he's getting answers to the questions. Rod had a lot of deep questions. And I hope he's got answers to the questions that he's looking for. That's what I hope. Let's see. Time is real. To balance with time and time out of time, Saturn represents this. There is time and then there is no time. And I guess it's time to get to the fucking show, right? It's time for me to stop talking about time and to start talking about astrology. That's what I think. He's in a good place and you have a good, yeah, thank you, Deborah. I believe it is. I believe yes. Yeah, I believe Rod is he was in a shitty place when he was here. Like his last few months were, they were not heaven on earth. I can tell you that right now. They were not heaven on earth. Darius Wright does controlled NDEs. I find his findings interesting. Controlled NDEs. Is it like that movie that whatchamacallit was in? Kiefer Sutherland and Julia Roberts. I was forgetting the name of that movie. But you know the movie I'm talking about. I think that's what we're talking about. That was the movie where they met and eventually they wound up with Ramtha. Oh, here. I got to send my friend a link. Hold on. She can't find me. I got to send my friend a link. Give me a second. Oh, hold on. I'm going to have to hear myself. There we go. All right. Can't leave my friend behind. All right. Thank you. All right, let's go back. Robert's friend, and I found Robert. Hey, we're all friends. With Flatliners. Thank you, Joan. Joan knew that. Thank you. Flatliners. Yes. We're all friends. We just, we all haven't met each other in 3D. We're all friends. All right. Should we just get to it? Let's just get to it. Let's just jump into it. Okay. So Donald Trump, and by the way, I don't know how long I'm going to stream tonight. I don't know if I've got, honestly, I don't know if I have 3 hours worth of material like I did last week. By the way, since we did the show last week, JD Vance, I guess was it 2 weeks ago when I was looking at little Marco, JD Vance is now saying that he may not run for president in 2028 because family issues. Well, JD Vance is expecting his fourth child with Usha, and that may get in the way of him becoming president. He might actually want to have a family life. What an interesting concept, right? A family life. So it seems like Marco Rubio is starting to move up the chain as we spoke last time. And what's interesting is that Susie Wiles is now at the White House full time because apparently she has cancer and is undergoing cancer treatment at the White House. And that is Marco Rubio's. You can just tell, like there are pictures of them together, right? And there seems to be lots of very intentful communication going on between the two of them. So she's huge in terms of Marco Rubio's ascent, right? So anyway, JD Vance seems to be kind of dropping further off the map as a candidate, which means that Marco Rubio is rising, and I think really puts him in the number 2 position behind Trump, even though Vance is still there by title. I'd be very surprised if he finishes out this term, and as well as Trump, for obvious reasons, which we actually talked about last week. So why don't we get into it? Donald Trump has issued a ultimatum, a doomsday for Iran. Now, I have 2 charts. I have one for the US and I have one for Iran. And the one for Iran is a total study in electional astrology. So hang on to your hats by the time we get to the Iran chart. But why don't we start off with this is the domestic chart right here. So I may have to re-rack this just because that's how StreamYard works. Yep. Re-racking right now. Okay, so this is for tomorrow afternoon. Let me make this a little bit bigger for you guys to see. This is for tomorrow after. It's actually tomorrow evening. So here we go. All right. This is essentially sort of the chart of the moment, only it's for tomorrow. We're just speaking of time. We're getting ahead of time a little bit, right? So here's the sun in glorious Aries. I need to do something. Give me 1 second here. All right. Let's see. Okay. Okay. I was just looking at some stuff from previous April 24th. Which I hadn't done before. I should have done for the show. I usually do. Oh, that's interesting. That is actually, I just stumbled upon a very interesting event from 1957. We'll see how this works out. Okay, let's get into the chart. So, all right, so this is going to be for tomorrow, right? Tomorrow night at 7:44 p.m., which is the supposed deadline, this 48-hour deadline. If you're not familiar with the deadline, I'll break it down for you. President Donald Trump has declared that within 48 hours, Iran must open the Straits of Hormuz so that anything can travel from that part of the world, whether it's crude petroleum, liquid natural gas, ammonium phosphate, whatever they have to get out of there. There's fertilizer stuff, which is really critical for growing food, even though we probably don't really want to use a ton of ammonia phosphate, also known as nitrogen. right? If I'm not mistaken, and that stuff our soils become addicted to it, and it allows us to produce massive amounts of food every year because we're able to put it into the soil, and it regenerates the soil very quickly. Otherwise, the soil would have nothing left because you have to do rotational crops and things like that, so that you just don't completely leach out all the minerals of the soil, which turns the food into, well, you can't even grow in it, right? So our farmland is going to be addicted to this stuff, and we get it out of the Middle East, along with all the petroleum products. So Trump has said that they have until tomorrow at 7:44 p.m., and that's Eastern Standard Time, to open the straits, or else he is going to essentially bomb all of their critical infrastructure. But by critical infrastructure, we're talking about electrical power, right? That's what he plans on doing. And here's the weird part about it, right? You're giving the Iranians 48 hours. Now, maybe what they want is they want the Iranians to start moving their shit around so that they can see them and track them and do whatever they do to identify where their targets should be. So by telling them you got 48 hours, like, okay, well, we got to get things into place, and then they can sort of trace that, see what was going on, and then impact those adjustments accordingly, right? I mean, that's one thing that could happen, but generally, you don't want to tell people when you're going to attack, unless you want to give them an advance warning so that they can reposition their weapons, right? Or get them, because if it's like, okay, well, if they're going to take out the electrical grid in Tehran or whatever, right, then they've got these underground tunnels, and they'll have to move their equipment underground tunnels into other parts where there could be more electrical available so that they can run their operation and launch their missiles, whatever, right? So that's a really odd thing, just in general. But we gave them 48 hours. We gave them fair warning. And according to the leadership in Iran, they're like, no, we're not going to open the Straits of Hormuz. So if this happens the way that it appears that it is going to happen, it will have serious effects on the RGCC, which is all the Gulf states and Israel, right? And could have serious effects on this proliferation of aggression around this war. I mean, it could get very, very serious. And we theoretically, they keep telling us that there are sleeper cells in this country, and that they could get switched on at any moment. So whether that's true or not, we're opening up a real can of worms. I mean, the thing with Neptune, right, is like Neptune brings us this whole idea of the fog of war. And it's behind Saturn now, right? Saturn is out front. Venus and Aries is not there to make friends. Venus and Aries is not there to negotiate at all, right? Venus and Libra negotiates. Venus and Libra is like, okay, fine. Let's sit down. Let's break bread. Let's figure out a win-win. But Venus and Aries is like, no. This is how I want it. This is how I want it, right? I is the key word in that relationship with Venus. It's not we, it's I. This is how I want it. And this Venus, I can tell you right now, is squaring Donald Trump's Saturn. So what he's doing is, or what this is doing, this event is doing, and I can even put it up there. I'll show it to you guys in a bit. Is it is straining his relationships and this whole idea of a coalition with people. Why don't I just go ahead and bring it up now so you can see what I'm talking about? Now, the upside with a let's see, let's do Trump. The upside with the Venus square is that there is a possibility, and I say there is a possibility that the finite component of the square can bring some very fixed and sort of looking for very fixed and let's see, Trump on the inside, Doomsday on the outside. Clear, very fixed and clear parameters. Like there's no wiggle room with squares. Like there's no wiggle room with squares at all. Let's do this. We'll do Doomsday. Where's Trump here? We'll put Doomsday on the outside. And this is just the chart for the U.S., right? This is well Trump time and U.S. time. So I'll give you an example of the squares. So where are we? Yeah. Okay. So here we go. All right. So Trump is on the outside, and the ultimatum is on the inside. Okay. So we can see that there's Trump's Venus and Saturn, right, in Cancer, and then we see Venus and Chiron squaring. So this is a hard square, right? And it's cardinal signs. So it's not, I think a mutable square is probably a bit more forgiving, I would say, right? There's a bit more forgiveness with the mutable square. But with the cardinal square, it's like you're accelerating something. I mean, that's the nature of it. Now, let me say this. I do think under certain circumstances, Venus-Saturn squares can be interesting when you get into a synastry chart. And I've talked about this before. Like if these people were lovers, first of all, I'm not sure I'd recommend them being together just based on this chart. But if they were, right, they would have this Venus-Saturn square going on. And for the longest time in astrology, the Venus-Saturn square in a synastry chart was considered to be malefic. Like, oh, you never want to get married when Venus is squaring Saturn, or you never want to hook up with somebody you got a Venus-Saturn square with. Well, I don't know the name of this couple, but there was this couple that actually did a sampling of couples and their synastry charts. And they found something very interesting, something that they didn't expect to find. And they found that people with Venus-Saturn squares like in their Sinastro chart, or let's say it was a midpoint composite chart and they had a Venus Saturn square, their marriages lasted. Not all of them did, but the majority of the couples that had this Venus Saturn square had long lasting relationships and marriages. And so you have to ask yourself the question, well, why is that? When astrology had normally said that this would be, terrible, would be great. No, you don't want to, you don't want this to be a part of your synastric makeup or midpoint composite. No, no, no. And the main reason, there's a couple reasons, but the main reason is that the Venus Saturn square ensured that the couples would not give up on their relationship. Now, at times it could be difficult because the difficulty is inherent in the square itself. But when you're dealing, this is the interesting thing with Saturn squares. Because Saturn in and of itself is a square, right? The influence of Saturn feels very much like a square. It just is, right? It's almost always difficult. Even when it's not difficult, it's sort of like, okay, well, you have a responsibility here. Yes, you have a nice little sextile going on, or you have a nice trine going on, but you still have to do the work. You have to put in the heavy lifting. It's just not as heavy as the square, right? Or the conjunction, or even heavier, I think, is the opposition. So the nature of Saturn itself is square energy. It's the way it is, right? Like Jupiter, the nature of Jupiter energy is like trine energy. It's just easy. It's almost too easy in some ways. You know what I'm saying? Anyway, so Saturn, when you get into these squares, right, the 90-degree angle, it's a 90-degree angle. And when you look at Saturn, like Saturn is the frickin' square, right? Saturn is the building block of the world. It is the four corners of this world, right? We live theoretically on a round world, theoretically, but with a square foundation, right? So there's some, interesting Freemasonic dialogue that comes here, like squaring the circle. So when you look at like the Kaaba, which is the black cube, right? It's the black cube for the Muslims. And I know that some of you have seen like Benjamin Netanyahu and some of these rabbis wear the black cube on their forehead, right? And the black cube is Saturn, right? It is Saturn. And when you look at it from, a two-dimensional angle, right, it is a four-sided square. It's the nature of Saturn, right? Saturn is the cube. It becomes the hypercube. And so when we get into a square, that is Saturn's energy. And I don't care what the square is. Right here, we could get into a square over here with Mercury and Jupiter, right? We got Mercury, Jupiter. It's still a square. So in that regard, it is still Saturnian, even though they are not Saturnian planets, right? So what they found with this sampling of these people, these couples, is that when they had the Venus Saturn square, it was like they had, in some ways, nowhere to go, right? It was like, okay, we're in this together, so we may as well work at this. And it may not have always been sexy, right? It may not always have been like, fairy tale romance, but it was enough to build a life on, right? And the thing with squares is that you get better and better and better and better. And so these relationships with Venus Saturn squares, they would take on a seasoning, right? Like when I say season, I'm talking like a wood, that gets seasoned. And then they turn out really well. I mean, better than most. Better than most. And it's kind of like in some ways, like when Saturn is in Libra, right? When Saturn's in Libra, it's exalted. When Saturn's in the seventh house, it's accidentally exalted. And when we have a Venus Saturn square, it takes on the dimensions of those aforementioned aspects, only with more heavy lifting, right? So I'm giving you one version of what this Venus Saturn square looks like. This is Trump's chart. Remember that. This is Trump on the outside. So, at this point in time, right, Venus is going through the seventh house of the electional chart that we just cast. Now, could that mean that there would be a greater effort towards diplomacy? I don't know, right? It's like, and I'll show you when we get to Iran's chart. This is a very fixed situation. And the Iranians don't really feel like they need to or want to back down. It's like, fuck you. Well, I'll last you. We'll just, we're ready for you. We've been planning for this for decades. And if you don't think they have, you're wrong. Now, there are some people out there that think that this whole thing is fake. It's a charade. And it's a really interesting concept, right? And it's something that, I don't know, maybe we should consider at some point along the way. Maybe what we're just seeing is nothing but fake shit, right? And they're all actors and they're all, part of reordering the world map. And they're all laughing and snickering behind the scenes. But then we also get imagery of areas that are severely damaged, right? I mean, the stuff that we're seeing from Israel seems pretty real, right? So this is Neptune, and this is what we call the fog of war. Like, what's really going on? What's really going on here? This is, then we have to trust Pete Hegseth to tell us the truth. I mean, have you ever seen that movie Starship Troopers? It's not one of my favorite movies, but I really like it. It's kind of gross because there's a lot of really, really gory scenes of people being impaled on these giant bug claws and shit, right? Like, there's like some. Paul Verhoeven has a very dark imagination, but there's something about this current conflict which reminds me a lot of Starship Troopers. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but the premise is, it's a Heinlein book. The premise is that Earth is involved in this battle with this other planet in another solar system, and the planet is called Klendathu, right? Klendathu. And something weird happens where the casting for this movie is kind of all over the place. And Paul Verhoeven casts Denise Richards as this starship captain, right? And they go through this weird kind of meteor belt, and it's almost unavoidable, right? But she doesn't do a very good job of navigating through this meteor belt. And it turns out that these meteors or asteroids are not really asteroids. They're more like, giant eggs for these giant insects that live on Klendathu. And what happens is that she slams into one of these giant eggs and fucks up the ship, and the people from Clendathu think it's an act of war, right? So then they send like bombs to Earth, right? And they bomb the shit out of Earth. And then now all of a sudden it's on, right? And then they've got to go have ground troops on Clendathu. And it's all very kind of hyped up, fascistic propaganda. It's very voyeuristic. A lot of people who are really into like I don't know, same-sex rights, freedom, liberation, they really like this movie because men and women shower together. They bunk. It's very Swedish in that way, right? Like Verhoeven's I think Verhoeven's Dutch, but it's very Swedish in that way. It's very co-edy, and you've got Denise Richards, who's the captain of the starship, and it's very voyeuristic because you do see some young naked female bodies in this movie. So, but then they got to go fight these bugs, and everything is very propagandized, and it feels, in a lot of ways, it feels like what's going on with Iran. Like there's these weird parallels in some ways with Starship Troopers, and Pete Hegseth is like a character out of Starship Troopers. The way that he talks and the invective, and it's like, where the fuck did you find this guy? And I swear to God, he seems like he's coked out. Am I right? Does Pete Hegseth seem like he's speeding a little bit? It's weird. It's almost too weird to be real. Doesn't it feel that way? It feels like kind of surreal. Like it's too weird to be like, what is this? Is this really happening? Is this guy really acting like this? Like, we've been through these wars before. We've been bullshitted and lied to before. But this guy's at a whole other level of aggression. It's a whole other level. He and Trump and Rubio, they're all Geminis. Anyway, I just feel like there's this weird parallel. And the Iranians are like the bugs on Clendathu. It's kind of what it feels like, right? If you know the movie, you know what I'm talking about. They're just these aliens. They're these insects, and they're these we gotta get them, right? There's no regard for the fact that insects have families too, right? Anyway, it just feels that way. But taking this Venus-Saturn square out of the context of the positive, which is the potential for relationship building, it is strained. Like this Venus-Saturn square is good over the course of a lifetime. You know what I mean? It's like it's all contextual. Like this is good over the context of a lifetime. Because you keep coming back to it, keep coming back to it, keep coming back to it. And a square, this is one of the things I teach in my course, which you can still purchase, by the way. A square is when you have, let's say you took a barbell or dumbbell rather, and you put it in your hand and you held your arm at a 90-degree angle. Like you wouldn't even have to go up and down and pump it. You can just leave it there and you would strain that muscle, right? That is a square. Or if you were to do like leg lifts and you were to just like where you're on your belly, right? Reverse leg lifts. You got them at 90 degrees and just held it there. You strain that muscle, right? That's what a square does. It puts a strain on the two planets that have tension, and then it builds muscle. That's what it does. But in order for this to work, you need to be able to have it for a long period of time. If you have it for a short period of time, and you have Venus in Aries, which doesn't have much patience at all, like it negates this ability to use that square as a building block. You see what I did? I took you into the positive ramification for the square, right? The Venus-Saturn square. And you might have even learned something about relationships. And then maybe the Venus-Saturn square that you have synastrically with your life partner isn't as bad as you thought it was. It may not be sexy, but you'll get to the finish line and be better people for it. This is not like that. This is strained. It's under pressure because Venus in Aries is hot, right? It needs to know now. If we had, we go on the other side of the chart. If Venus was in Libra, squaring Saturn in Cancer, we might have ourselves a little reconciliation here. We might have a bit of a peace talk, but that's not what we have. And Venus is conjuncting Chiron. And in this instance, just this instance, party feels like, well, I'll say this. I'll rephrase this. Both parties feel like they have the upper hand with a Venus-Chiron square, right? Like they're looking at the other relationship with the Venus-Chiron square that we got them, they're weak, right? We've got them, they're weak, they're vulnerable. This is Venus in Aries, conjunct Chiron. There can be a little bit of blind spot, sort of optimism there. But this is how but then you throw that T square in there, Chiron's now part of the mix. And I think it's people overestimating. I mean, the thing with Chiron, right? Like Chiron is either you're either going to display patience with Chiron because of the Saturnian side of Chiron, or you won't have any patience at all. And you will jump in and be completely risk averse because of the Uranian side of Chiron, right? So Chiron has both Saturn and Uranus as part of the factor that goes into determining sort of the psychological condition of Chiron. And to me, Chiron's like one of the most important elements in astrology. I mean, we really get to know who we are with Chiron. I mean, my Chiron, holy shit. And years later, like when I went through my quote unquote Chirotic crisis, 28 degrees, which is where my Chiron is, the age of 28, also the beginning of my Saturn return, I had a fucking nervous breakdown. Chiron in Aquarius in my third house, 28 degrees, nervous fucking breakdown. And the thing was, nobody knew. Like it was my own private Idaho. And I thought I was good, right? I thought I'd gotten through it. I thought it was, all these years later, I dealt with my madness. And sure enough, Chiron return comes around, and what happens to yours truly? Yeah, I get a 3-day psych hold on my Chiron fucking return. Right? It's like, no, you weren't really quite completely done with what happened at 28, right? And to me, it was one of the most powerful experiences of my life. If I had to do all over again, would I do it all over again? I don't know. That's a really interesting question. Part of me says yes. Part of me says yes, because it really allowed me to deal with madness in a way that was kind of in my face, right? It was interesting. I think if I had to do it all over again, maybe. Ask me another time, I might say no. But here we are with Chiron in Aries, right? And we're getting to the end. We're almost in Chiron in Taurus. When and the interesting thing about Chiron in Taurus is that's when Chiron was discovered 1977. Chiron's discovered in the sign of Taurus. So we're almost getting back to the discovery of Chiron. Chiron is going to have its own Chiron return. Imagine that, right? 2027, Chiron has its own Chiron return when it was first discovered. The inaugural 50-year cycle of Chiron. And I think that that's actually meaningful. I think it's really meaningful because Chiron is in Taurus. When they discovered it, and it's like, oh, okay, well, where are we with the Earth stuff, right? Where are we with the Earth stuff? Things get really interesting in 1977. You have the blackout in New York. I mean, that blackout in New York changes everything. It's like the birth of hip hop. It truly is. It is the birth of fucking hip hop. They have this blackout in New York in 1977. It was in July of 1977, if I'm not mistaken. And the city goes dark. Could you imagine New York going dark now? How insane that would be. So there's this blackout, and then it's really unfortunate. I mean, there were a lot of family businesses that just got ruined, like in places like Brooklyn and the Bronx. I mean, I've seen specials on it, and there was this family there that had a sporting goods store, a small sporting goods store, and it got completely looted and just ruined. They were never coming back. They weren't coming back. And this was a store where, like they kind of helped out the neighborhood, and maybe you couldn't afford a basketball, and they're like, what do you got? Oh, I've got like $5. Okay, give me $5. Don't tell your friends. Stuff like that, right? And the look on the woman's face, she was just hurt, is the word, right? So there were all these like lootings going on in 1977, summer of 1970, July 1977. It's the blackout. And one of the things that gets hit are like pawn shops and places to sell audio equipment. And what do they do with that, right? They start to like do scratching and there was this one guy named DJ Kool Herc who was from Jamaica, and he was like the first DJ, and he would set up his sound stations because they had sound stations in Jamaica, right? And they would play like dub music and do all that crazy shit with the echo, with the dub. And that's where he came from. And so he started to do it, but he was doing it with like other stuff, right? He was kind of starting to get into the mixing of beats. So he becomes this guy who all of a sudden people are watching. They're like, wow, well, I could do this. So they have this equipment now that they're all stolen from all these pawn shops and, these places of audio equipment. And they start to do hip hop, right? They start to, do their little, double Dutch bus shit. And that's a byproduct of this Chiron in Taurus that happens during the summer of 1977. And it's kind of interesting, right? Because, I think when you go back and you look at hip hop and the roots of hip hop, it is tribal. East side, west side. I mean, that's in there, right? And eventually, like the tribal vibe of hip hop is East Coast, West Coast, and it goes into Tupac and and you had the guys from L.A. And then you had Dr. Dre and that whole crew, and then you had the guys from New York. Biggie and Puff Daddy and Bad Boy. It was tribal, right? But even before then, it was tribal. You had like uh, Africa Bambaataa and the Zulu Nation, right? There was this tribal vibe to hip hop, right? And then you had like tribes within sort of the hip hop world. You sort of had these new kind of black science groups, KRS-One and Boogie Down Productions. And that was kind of like one tribe. And then you had sort of the humorous tribe, like Biz Markie. And then you had sort of the fly tribe, like Cool Mo D, right? Let's work, right? There was sort of like that sort of version of the tribe. Then you had, the sort of the politically conscious version of a tribe, Public Enemy. There were all these tribes. Hip hop is tribal at its roots, right? Tribal to the point where you got into colors and gangs. You were the wrong color in the wrong neighborhood. That stuff had been along for a while, right? But it really got a boost during hip hop. So Chiron and Taurus was the beginning of this kind of tribal thing. And it all starts with the blackout in New York City. Well, we're not quite there, but we will be there. Chiron's getting ready to go into Taurus, and it's going to have its Chiron return. And it's going to be interesting looking at Chiron through that lens. And, it seems like we have all these disconnected tribes now. We're all disconnected, these disconnected tribes. We got the blue hair tribe. We've got the, born again Zionist Doomsday Christian tribe. We got all these tribes, right? They're all it's all broken down into these tribal affiliations. MAGA is a tribe. It's just very interesting, and I wonder what the impact of Chiron returning to Taurus and its own Chiron return, right? Will there be like an assimilation of tribes? Are people going to figure out how to work together? Because this is kind of where it started, right? It started, you could go back to 1977 and let's go to England in 1977. There's a whole new tribe, kind of forming in England. It's all based on punk rock. That's 1977, right? That's the fucking Sex Pistols. It's the Clash. Like, it is on. And they have like even a tribal look about them. With safety pins. Like, they don't look like anybody else. They certainly don't look like Led Zeppelin or The Who or Pink Floyd, right? They don't look like your common Londoners. Like, they are a fucking tribe. And then it gets kind of interesting. And even when you like spiral out by about 2 years, you get to around 1979, and you get Adam fucking Ant, right? Who's got grease paint on his face. And he's got Burundi drumming with, these kind of surf guitars. And it's very tribal. And you get Bow Wow, which is very tribal. It's very interesting. Like, Chiron and Taurus makes its presence felt in music. The world starts to get tribal. And you could say, well, Woodstock was tribal, but it was kind of like one tribe, right? They were all one tribe during Woodstock. That's the way Woodstock was, right? It's just one tribe. And it's really right on the brink of, I think Woodstock was 1969. So yeah, that's like, it's like Saturn. It's like Chiron and Aries, right? It's very Chiron and Aries. Yeah. So It's all one tribe. We're on one tribe. And that's the way Woodstock was. It was the Aquarian tribe. And you could have all these different facets, but it was all like, one festival, one people, one tribe. But that changed. Right? That changed with Chiron in Taurus in a very big way. A really big way. So it'll be interesting to see what happens when Chiron does go into Taurus. And some of you may be asking, well, Robert, when does Chiron go into Taurus? As I'm going to tell you. Let's see. All right. What do we got? Let's see. Chiron goes into Taurus. I'm going to need to know this date by heart. In June. June 20th, Chiron goes into Taurus. Now, that does not mean that it experiences its Chiron return. Technically, since we discovered it in 1977, that would be 50 years later. That would be 2027. But Chiron does go into Taurus on the 20th of June. And it's a very interesting time. It does go retrograde and it goes backwards into Aries for a bit, which is what Chiron does. Right? So it's going to go back into Aries. But then in 2027, it's there for good. So in April, right, April 14th of 2027, I'll show you, it's right there. You can see Chiron going back from Aries into Taurus. And we're off and running. And the retrogrades don't take us all the way back. Right? It stops right. Ooh. Do we go back into Aries briefly in 2028? I don't think so. We should stop at 0. Let's just find out. We're finding out together. Retrograde, direct. There it is. See that? So once it goes into Taurus in 2027, it don't go back to Aries, right? And we're off and running, and we are in the return of Chiron. So it's right there. Right there. April 14th. That's really interesting because that's when we have all this other stuff going on. I don't want that one. What do I want? Let's go back to the Trump chart. There we go. So I just went off on a bit of a Chiron and Taurus tangent. And it feels to me like, one of the things Chiron's going to do is it's going to start to square Pluto when it goes into Taurus. And that's a heavy duty square. That is a heavy duty. It's a really tribal square. Really tribal square. God, it seems such a lot. Like things could take off so quickly. You know what's fascinating? How rapidly things can accelerate towards a state of conflict and war, if indeed all this is going on and it's going down the way that it's going down. Like, it could easily accelerate and go in the other direction. Right? It could. It could easily accelerate and go in the other direction. If it's going this fast, this quickly. I guess maybe in some ways it's easier to tear things down than it is to build them up. There's some truth to that. But we're spending all this time and effort, right, to move into a period of what feels to me like destruction of the system, the Great Reset. And maybe with a little effort, we could, build something a little bit better. But there's too many vested interests involved, and too many grievances, and too many lives lost, and too many vendettas. I was on this. I was on this Instagram post, and it was this guy who. This was from a while ago. He was a soldier, and he was in Iraq, and he was part of a unit that was told to go in and basically, RPG mortar launch and strafe this village, and then go in to take it, right? And he did that. It was on his orders, right? And he went in and he saw this woman, and she was standing over her husband who had been killed in this mortar exchange, or whatever it was. And it was really interesting. He said something really interesting. He said, I wanted to pull all of my hair out. Do you know who else said that? Marlon Brando as Colonel Kurtz, when he had gone in with this special forces unit and inoculated all of these, supposed Vietnamese people in their village, and they came back the next day and they saw a pile of little arms that had been cut off above where they had been inoculated, right? So Brando's character goes into this. Oh, it's a famous rant, right? It's a famous cinematic rant, which, by the way, Brando comes up with, and he says, I wanted to pull my hair out, right? And that's exactly what this guy says. And you can tell that he was deeply, deeply troubled. Deeply troubled. And the woman comes up to him and puts her hand on his face and says, Inshallah, right? Which is like God's will or whatever, right? I think that's what it means. And you could tell that this guy was haunted by this experience. And I went through the comments, and the comments were brutal. Absolutely brutal. And they were, and I'm not here to diss Muslim people. Okay, I'm not here to do that. But a lot of the comments that were brutal were coming from Muslim people. And they were like, serves you right, you satanic snake. May you burn in hell. I mean, there were lots of heavy invective, right? Heavy duty invective. And damnation. Like, this guy with his image had all these people literally cursing him and damning him. It was very heavy. And I thought to myself, well, what would a Christian do? And I'm not here to put Christianity up on some kind of a stand, right? But the whole idea of Christianity would be to forgive that person, right? It would be like, oh, that person's in incredible pain, incredible suffering, right? Like, Jesus commends me to forgive that person, right, for their sin, because that's what Jesus would do. Because you can see that person is in a terrible amount of pain, right? Like, generally speaking, that would be the Christian way of doing things. Now, whether you agree with me or not, that's another story, right? But that would be the Christian way of doing things. And that was not the general consensus I got from those comments. And my takeaway was that this Venus-Saturn square is not going to end very well. That you're dealing with a large contingency of people that are really, really pissed off. And they see America as the great Satan. And our friends in the Middle East have gone out of their way to get us involved in these conflicts. Right? They've gone out of their way to get us involved in these conflicts with these countries. And we have inflicted huge amounts of loss and pain, whether directly or indirectly, on these communities. And you can say, well, we had to because, you know, they're compelled by Allah to, you know, have a global caliphate and take us all out. And so, man, if we don't take care of them first, then we're screwed. And there are people that do believe that. Right? Like this goes back to the Holy Wars, goes back to the Crusades. You know, tap Pete Higgs on the shoulder. You know, I've been around Muslim people. Some of them have been the nicest people I've ever met. Right? I can't say I've been around any radical Muslim people. Turned out, I probably might have a bit of an edge to them. Just like, you know, you get extremists in every religion that have a bit of an edge. But some of the Muslim people I've been around, some of the Persian people I've been around, super cool, super chill, really nice, very intelligent, well-mannered, highly cultured. And again, I haven't been around, you know, a ton, but you know, it's like I grew up in California. I was in the music business. You know, there was a type of music that I was involved with. Back then, they called it world music, right? So I got exposed to a lot of musicians that were from other parts of the world. A lot of them happened to be Muslim or Indian, right? And a lot of them were super, super cool people. I got to know Zakir Hussain, who passed away a couple of years ago, tabla player, amazing guy, wonderful man, right? And it was the thing. Music was the thing that you know brought us all together. You know. Anyway, I'm skipping around a little bit, but I'm just telling you that this square is not good. It's not good for Trump. It's not good for any negotiation process. I don't think there is a negotiation here. If it was longer, yes, but it's not, right? And and Venus is afflicted, and nobody wants to lose face. That is the affliction of Chiron with Venus. Nobody wants to lose face. Not only that, but, right, this is Trump, and I've been talking about this, right? Trump is on a delusional trip. I'm sorry, you may love Trump, right? Like we have been told to love and support the president and the country no matter what, right? It's our country. I'm sorry, I grew up when they kicked Nixon out of office. And you know, my loyalty was completely tarnished from that moment forward. I was never loyal really to another president again, just because he was an American. And some of that had to do with the fact that I felt ashamed about Nixon, right? And you know, the thing with Nixon too, right? Like he gets booted out, 74. So it's not quite Chiron and Taurus, but it's not far behind. You know, we're kind of at that degree of Chiron where Nixon does get booted out of office anyway. But this, to me, this is that Neptune, right? This is Trump's Neptune right here. This is Neptune. This is Sun, Saturn. So Trump is going through a Neptune opposition. You see that? Right? And it is going through Trump's 8th house, which for Trump, not great. It's not a great transit. Right? And, you know, is he overcome, you know, by this spirit of war? Yeah, maybe. You know, it's going through his 8th house. You know, it's the underworld. And his Neptune is kind of a bit delusional, right? Like, especially the Neptune opposition and the health thing with Saturn, not great. So again, this Doomsday, what is he basing this on? Right, that's his sun and Saturn. Like, what the fuck is he basing this on? Actually, that's his sun and that's his Saturn. But even his sun, even that's in square, right? We got Sun, Uranus. There's a Sun Uranus conjunction. What's this? Squaring Mercury. Right there, squaring Mars. The Mars square is the one that's really mission critical, right? That's not great for him. This is whoever told him for him that this was a good day for an ultimatum. They need to recheck their coordinates. Now he's in the Pluto opposition. Will he make it through the Pluto? That's another story, right? That's another part of the Trump sort of telling of the tale here, right? The Pluto opposition. Yeah, and Pluto, this is for the United States right in here. Pluto at this time is going through the fourth house of the United States. Right? This is the United States. This is Washington, D.C., right? This is D.C. This is, the center of America. Theoretically, right? And there's Pluto down there. So we got a Pluto opposition. If I change the time around, Pluto would be in a different house. I mean, that's the nature of the beast here, right? Fifth house, third house, but no, it's in the fourth house. I don't know. It's not a great opposition. Maybe you could make a case that, we're coming from a position of strength, right? With Pluto hitting that ascendant, that somehow this is going to be better for negotiation with Libra on the ascendant here, right? This is just Libra on the ascendant. This is not Trump's Neptune or Trump's Jupiter, right? Which we know that they're in opposition here and square over here. So maybe just by that degree, okay, we're the ones with the bigger hammer. We'll open the Straits of Hormuz. Uranus has also been squaring Trump's Mars. Trump's Mars is at 28. Leo, right on Regulus, feels like, his actions are ordained by God, right? So there's Trump's Mars right there, 26 Leo. His right side's 28. And then here's transiting Uranus at 28. So he's got a Uranus-Mars square. No patience. No patience. And Uranus has been on his midheaven, right? And we're having Uranus getting ready to go into Gemini. I don't think it's this is not a great, I'm just saying, based on his chart and this chart, I don't think it's a great ultimatum. And then you what do you do now? You can't back out. Once you throw down the glove like that, you can't back out. If you throw the glove down like that, you back out. You are considered weak sauce. All right, so I had it here. Where'd it go? Oh yeah, it's right there. So I have Iran's chart right here. Now, for them, it takes place at 3:14 in the morning on Tuesday, March 24th. So there's a time change. So 7:44 p.m. is 3:14 in the morning in their part of the world. And this is what their chart looks like. They got Pluto on the midheaven, or on the ascendant rather. That, boys and girls, is destruction. Now, what's interesting, of course, there's Chiron involved. What's interesting is I actually think Iran gets stronger as a result of this. Right? Like, look at the sun. The sun right here, 3 degrees, Aries. It's all these planets are now sextiling the ascendant, right? So let's say there's big boom there. And Aquarius, Pluto, right? I mean, that shit could be quote unquote nuclear, whether or not you think we have nuclear bombs, right? They have these things that they can ignite and vaporize above, before they hit the ground. They're hyperbaric or whatever they're called. They're like very intense, and they bring huge amounts of heat with them, right? So we got plutonium with Pluto, uranium because of Uranus, the ruler of Aquarius, and it's right on the ascendant of Tehran, right there. And we have a square with Chiron down in the third house. But that's, it's, I don't know if this damages Iran in the way they think it will. In fact, I think they get stronger. That's what I think. Right? If they go through with this, and Iran big FU and Trump big FU, right? It's like, okay, let's bring out the B2s and start dropping shit. They better hope that Iran really buckles, because I don't think they're going to buckle, and I think this actually makes them stronger. I mean, look at the midheaven. The midheaven is Scorpio, which is rebirth, and it's a part of fortune, right at the top. And everything is below the horizon. I think that these people have prepared. Even this moon square with Mercury, right? Moon in the fourth house, Gemini, Uranus in the fourth house. I think that they've got, to me, this is a chart that's got contingency plans. And knowing something's coming 48 hours in advance, you'd be surprised how much can get done with a 48-hour window. So I negotiation-wise, I don't think it's good. Is there destruction? Yeah, there can be with Pluto here, but I don't think it's ultimate destruction. In fact, I think it actually makes these people stronger. You've got resiliency here with Saturn in the second house and the sun in the second house. And yeah, I don't, maybe it works out. Maybe they figure out a way to play nice and the Straits of Hormuz are opened again, but I don't know. And I just don't think it's going to go down that way. But I'll tell you what, it does not cripple Iran. Whatever it is they have planned for it does not cripple Iran, even with Pluto on the ascendant at that time. Now, that's if they actually act at that time, right? It's like if they're really setting the clock, okay, this is it. We had this discussion about time earlier on in the show. And this is one of those times where time would actually mean something. One man's opinion. I don't think this goes terribly for them. That's my sense. Like if they had Pluto down in their fourth house, oh boy, I'm not sure that'd be that great, right? And if Pluto was in the fourth house, what's it squaring? It's squaring Chiron. So that would put like Chiron, 1, 2, 3 houses over. So Chiron would be 1, 2, 3 houses. So it'd be in the 7th house. That'd be like what we saw with the U.S. chart. Worse for the U.S. chart, actually, to be honest with you, with Pluto in the 4th versus Pluto on the ascendant. Yep. Anyway, I guess we'll see how this thing plays out. We'll know by 8:15 tomorrow. Make sure you follow your picks in the NC2As. You know, it's so weird. We live in a weird world. All right. I wanted to talk a little bit about Chuck Norris, and then we'll get out of here. So there were some people that I trust online that were bringing up some interesting things about Chuck Norris. Now, I got to be clear about this. I was never a Chuck Norris fan. Right. I did a thing on him the other day, and it was like I did it in the spirit of he was like America's John Wayne at that time, during a time when America did not have a John Wayne. Right. Chuck Norris was not an anti-hero. Chuck Norris was a hero, right? He always portrayed the role of a hero. But so one of the things that I did bring up was his relationship with Canon Films. And Canon Films was owned and operated by these two Israeli-born filmmakers. Well, they were cousins, Golem and Globus. Yoram, Menachem Golan, and Yoram Globus. Those were their names. And they were the ones that ran Canon Films, which Chuck Norris was a big part of, and so was Charlie Bronson. And I thought it was really interesting that as we got deeper into this Iran, Israel, U.S. war conflict, axis of doom, whatever, right? That Norris had been involved heavily with these, Zionist filmmakers, right? I mean, they had the Zionist blood running through their veins. And I just thought it was interesting that he would pass away as this thing was happening, right? Then come to find out, Chuck Norris was a fucking Zionist. He was a big-time Christian Zionist. There are pictures with him and Bibi Netanyahu. And then somebody came up with he was involved with the McMartin kid scandal. And I'm like, whoa, that's really weird. But I was never really into Chuck Norris. And I felt like he was, I don't know, two-dimensional. Like if I was into somebody who was a hero, I like complex heroes. I like people that had to deal with the not so savory parts of their nature and either overcome them or succumb to them or whatever, right? Like to me, those people were more nuanced and more layers, were more interesting. You watch a Chuck Norris movie, you always knew who was going to win. And you always knew that Chuck Norris was going to kick some ass. It's one of my peeves a bit about The Equalizer with Denzel Washington. I mean, it's a much cooler version, right? And there's no rah Team America in it, but he always wins. He always wins. Who else always wins is Jack Reacher. I want to see Jack Reacher against The Equalizer. To me, that's a celebrity death match I'd pay for. Anyway, so I was never really into Chuck Norris, right? And it's like I knew he had his infomercials, and he was, theoretically squeaky clean, sort of this Taekwondo John Wayne guy, right? And a good martial artist. But I was not really clued in to the Zionist side of Chuck Norris, right? So it caused me to reevaluate his chart. And one of the things that he's got a weird chart, and I talked about this on Friday. Like, to me, this is a really, really weird chart. It's kind of a bit of a bucket chart in some ways, but also not really. Like, if Pluto wasn't here, like if Pluto was, I don't know, further on down the line, right? He'd have a perfect, let's just put Pluto below the horizon. He'd have a perfect bucket chart. All these planets would be down here. There's Neptune. He resolves Neptune, and all the contents of the chart flow into Neptune once he resolves it, right? There is some degree of that. So he's got kind of a bucket chart with a bit of a blister on it. We'll call Pluto the blister. And I saw Neptune here as film, right? Because it was opposing the sun and opposing Mercury and opposing Neptune. And, so this is, to me, a Neptune rules movies, film, cinema, right? So he plays this, this, whatever these roles are that we're able to sort of, that's what I'm looking for, project onto him, right? And if I'm not mistaken, the U.S. Neptune is very close to that Neptune. Let me just find it here. Here we go. So the U.S. Neptune is at 22 degrees. And, excuse me, Chuck Norris's Neptune is at 24 degrees. So here's what I'll do. I will give you another journey into synastry. And this time we're going to do Chuck Norris in the USA. And I'll show you how a country's planet can affect an individual's chart. So we just got to find old Chuck. There he is. We'll put him here. And we'll put the USA on the outside, and we'll go there now. And I will share that tab with you. And you can see exactly what I'm talking about, right? So there's Norris's Neptune, and there's the U.S. Neptune right there. So I think that that's actually quite powerful. And in a lot of ways, like, that allows us, or allowed us as a country, to just tap into, like, the myth of Chuck Norris. Like, we don't really see him. You know what I mean? We don't really see him because also his sun is on the other side of the chart. So that's interesting. The true node for the U.S. is right on Chuck Norris's Juno, which is like a relationship. And Chuck Norris is always about justice and balance. And that's what he did, right? Theoretically, he brought that to the screen. He was the guy that brought justice and balance to the screen. Walker, Texas Ranger. What do they do? They bring balance back to a situation. Somebody's bad, they apprehend the bad guy, they restore the good. That's Libra, right? So Norris has kind of a bit of a role with this, like, that's his true. That's the true node of the U.S., and that's Chuck Norris's Juno right there. What else? What other connections do we have? Let's see. So Chuck Norris has Jupiter. Look at that. So Chiron. Look at that. So his south node is right on the U.S. Chiron. Look at that. That's really interesting, right? That's really, really interesting. So, yeah. So the U.S. Chiron is at, let's see, 20 Aries, and Chuck's, let's see, South Node. Let's see. Is that right? Where's the nodes here? Libra. Yeah. So, yeah, 20 Aries. And the U.S. Chiron is at 20 Aries. So, South Node. Yeah. So, he's going to be like America's warrior, right? I mean, he kind of plugs into that, you know? And so Chuck Norris came into this lifetime knowing what being a warrior was like. But in his lifetime, he's supposed to be a guy that brings peace to the world, theoretically. So he's really plugging into this Chiron. That's so fascinating. Really, really fascinating. And his Chiron plugs into the U.S. sun. So Chuck Norris is definitely wired into the chart of the United States. Now, where it gets, I think, interesting is some of these accusations, like he's a Zionist, and he probably is. He probably is, especially with Neptune on the midheaven, or Neptune, in the ninth house, because ninth house tends to be, religious, right? Very interesting. But, I think that there's a lot of occultation in the U.S. chart with Chuck Norris. So we don't really see it. Like our Neptune for this country is on top of his Neptune. So we don't really see it as much, right? And we want to believe the illusion. That's the nature of Neptune. We want to believe the illusion. So to me, this is fascinating. And then his Mars Uranus is right there in the U.S. fifth house, which makes sense, right? Pastimes, sport, movies are like pastimes or entertainment. And even like karate is like a pastime. You pick it up as a hobby, right? So interesting. The McMartin stuff, I just kind of heard about, and I don't know exactly what that would look like, but I'd have to really dig into his fourth house with the children stuff, right? I really have to dig into that. But there's not a lot of love lost with people who are anti-Zionist and pro-Palestinian. I think Chuck knew which side of the bread was buttered. And I think a lot of that came through his association with Canon Films. And it's clear that this guy's tied into America. I mean, look at those two Neptunes. And just one on top of the other. Right? So, illusion, the nature of illusion. Okay. I think that's about it for tonight. Maybe we go 2 hours. Why don't we put a cap on it for 2 hours? And I hope you learned something this evening, or were at least entertained by yours truly. And I guess we'll find out more. What are my predictions? Whatever happens, Iran gets stronger. Based on that chart, they get stronger. I think Donald Trump gets weaker. I think he's put himself in a box. And you may not agree with me. You may think that we've got all the technology and all the tools and, all the nice toys at our disposal. But, when you look at that chart, his chart specifically, It ain't easy. This man is going through a major trial, and the negotiating part, there's no window for it. With that Venus-Saturn square, Venus in here, there's no window for it. So forget the negotiation. I mean, it could get ugly. It could get very ugly. You may want to get some water. You may want to get some food. Did you guys see Professor Jiang on Tucker? It was really interesting. First of all, he's very bright. He's very, very bright. He understands current historical and geopolitical patterns. He's very good. I wonder what his sign is. And he brings up a lot of interesting stuff on that interview with Tucker. And at the end, though, he talks about, Tucker says, well, what do we need to do? And he basically says we need a new world order. That's what he says. We need a new world order. So you get all of these really interesting predictions. But at the end of the day, he says, oh, we need a new world order. And he did go to Yale. Is he a skull and boner? I don't know. He's got 971,000 followers. Wow. He's 50 years old. I'm trying to find a date on him. I can't find him. He's born in 1976. And he's had his YouTube channel for 2 years now. And he says that America is inches away from a civil war. Yeah, I can see that. Definitely. I mean, we've talked about that. I mean, we've talked about it. In terms of astrology. This guy's really blown up, hasn't he? Here's the problem with the third temple. There is some doubt that there was even a second temple. So they said that there was a second temple that existed. So, yeah. So they say the second one was in the first one. Is there any historical evidence for the existence of a second? Interesting. Interesting. I got to get into this a bit more. Because there is some, there's some interesting like timing. Like the second temple might have actually been part of the first temple, which they didn't have to build. That's interesting. All right. Anyway, maybe we'll come back with that next week. All right, that's it. I'm out of here. As always, thank you for being here. Hit like and subscribe on the way out. If you liked and enjoyed the show and you want to hear more of this, more of the global look at astrology, and you can always get a reading with yours truly. That's available here. And don't forget our friend over at truehempscience.com, our good friend Chris. And if you are having a challenging time with our times, the gummies are your friend. Trust me on this. They got daytime gummies. They got nighttime gummies. Help you sleep. Tinctures. All you got to do is type in 15MINS, and you will get a goodie bag when you order $100 or more of Chris's fine organic CBD products. So True Hemp Science, our one and only sponsor besides me, robertphoenix.com. All right, that's it. Take care of yourselves. Much love to all of you. And, Rod, wherever you are, God bless you. I hope you're creating a planet where cats have wings, and that you're on to even greater stuff than that. All right. Bye for now. We'll see you on Tuesday with the Astro Weather, 8 a.m. right here. Take care.